January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. Human trafficking is a form of modern-day slavery in which people are controlled and exploited for profit. It is a nationwide problem, but it's happening right here in our own community.
News 8's Sarah Tamer spoke to a local sex trafficking survivor. In this News 8 Investigates report, she joins us now to tell us what defines human trafficking and why so many cases go unreported.
Human trafficking is not a new problem in Wisconsin. In fact, Wisconsin was home to the first anti-trafficking campaign in U.S. history. The campaign originally started in response to the growing sex trade that developed around the logging and mining industries in the state during the 1880s. Although sex trafficking has been around for more than a century, advocates and law enforcement tell me there is still denial that sex trafficking exists. I met with a local sex trafficking survivor who shared her story. She helps explain why it's easy to fall victim to sex trafficking and why the statistics are much lower than the reality. Now, a warning for those who are watching, some of the details in this story may be difficult to hear. Terry Smith was married to a polygamist when she was 8 years old. Her husband at the time was 22.
It's intergenerational in my family. Some of the abuse and history of that my mother went through and my grandmother went through.
The marriage wasn't legal, but she was born to a fundamentalist Mormon family in the 1970s, and it was part of her family's history to be married as a child.
He definitely sold me for sex.
She grew up in a small town between La Crosse and Eau Claire. Terry mostly lived a sheltered life, which included no visits to a real doctor. But when she failed homeschooling, a public school was her saving grace.
Teachers that knew something was going on. A lot of teachers helped me.
At 8 years old, Terry wasn't familiar with what most would consider a normal childhood. Among the sexual and mental abuse she suffered, she was forced to smuggle drugs, often at truck stops in Wisconsin Dells.
I remember them hiding them on me in the safety chairs, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And there was definitely a trade of sex for drugs.
Terry lived almost all of her life as a sex trafficking victim. She says she didn't realize she was being sex trafficked until she started college.
One of my first signs that I had such a different lifestyle was I did childhood development classes for my psychology major, and I had to take them like 3 times before I could pass it because I just didn't know what the normal childhood was like.
It didn't all come together that she was a victim until she was in her 40s. That's the reality for the 100,000 or more children who are sex trafficked every year in the United States. Like Terry, most victims don't know they are victims. In 2016, Wisconsin had 65 reported cases of human trafficking. 54 of those cases were sex trafficking. Last year, there were 47 reported cases of human trafficking in the state. 34 were sex trafficking cases. These cases only represent calls or texts to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which in the last 2 years received a total of 472 phone calls of human trafficking in Wisconsin. This made Wisconsin the state with the 21st highest call volume in all of 50 states. But there are many more cases in Wisconsin and in La Crosse County that have not been reported. The lack of a reliable estimate of the number of sex trafficking cases is partly due to the hidden and illicit nature of the crime. The other part is awareness. Detective Sergeant of Sensitive Crimes with the La Crosse Police Department, Tim O'Neill, says the department wasn't required to report sex trafficking cases to the FBI until 2016 because in the past it wasn't identified as a crime that occurred in regularity, and there simply wasn't enough awareness on the issue. Since 2016, police identified 2 official child sex trafficking cases in La Crosse County, but they suspect there are far more cases beyond what the numbers show.
Based on information that we've gathered throughout the investigations that we've worked. Several sex assault victims have told us they have been victimized by not one but several different suspects. That's an indicator right there that this is occurring.
O'Neill says unlike other crimes, sex trafficking is one of the hardest to track.
It may not be entirely difficult to identify it. It's more of a problem trying to find people who want to tell us what is going on.
Sex trafficking victims are taught and trained not to cooperate with law enforcement. Their traffickers often promise them financial and emotional security, leaving victims powerless in changing their own circumstances.
The traffickers are smart.
For victims who do want help, there is fear they would be prosecuted for a crime they were forced to be a part of.
A lot of the early coaching that I got was exactly what I could say and what I couldn't say.
Perpetrators often use force, fraud, or coercion to manipulate and gain control over victims. Terry was usually reluctant to run away or get law enforcement involved for fear of retaliation by her trafficker.
All of the things that you can be given can also be taken away. And so that's used to control you and used to control the experiences.
Franciscan sister Marlene Weisenbeck started the La Crosse Task Force to eradicate modern slavery in 2013. She made it her mission to raise awareness on the issue after being asked by the Obama administration to join the United States Advisory on Human Trafficking. It was then she learned La Crosse was not immune to the crime. From 2014 to 2017, the task force helped 5 victims and survivors of sex trafficking in La Crosse County. Weisenbeck is now working to provide services for victims and works closely with local agencies to help track encounters with victims. But she says there's a lot more work to be done.
To name it for what it is, because often it has been associated with prostitution, drug addiction, sexual assault, and all of those things are related in some way. So it isn't that nothing has ever been done, but to zero in on why those things are happening.
Law enforcement officials say as long as there's demand for sex trafficking, it won't ever stop. Sex trafficking is an estimated $9 billion industry in the U.S., making it the second largest source of profit after drugs. Investigators explain it can happen to anyone, rich or poor, men or women, adults or children, leaving those who are able to find a way out with lasting scars.
I have flashbacks all the time. I've been working on it for a while, so I certainly, have ways of coping with that. One of the reasons I have a service dog is she wakes me up from nightmares, because I have nightmares. I have insomnia, basically, because I don't like my nightmares, and I wake myself up, and the nightmares are flashbacks.
Terry's mission is to now raise awareness on sex trafficking. She wants the attitude of denial to change. She's hoping more people will come to learn that sex trafficking is not just a big city problem.
In some ways, it's harder in this part of the state, because we don't think in small towns it's happening. But I want people to know that the small towns are the covers.
There are now 7 assembly bills waiting to be passed in Wisconsin to track human trafficking. Just last year, the Wisconsin Department of Justice created a human trafficking bureau because in nearly every county in Wisconsin, law enforcement reported cases of human trafficking.
So Sarah, what does the public need to know in order to spot the problem in the first place?
Absolutely. Well, it all starts with using your judgment and trusting your instincts. If you notice something suspicious, ask a potential victim questions such as, what kind of work do you do? Can you leave your job if you wanted to? What is your relationship to the person you are with? Where do you eat or where do you sleep? Advocacy members tell me these are all questions that have been proven to help identify a potential sex trafficking case.
And this is such a broad topic. I know News 8 is going to continue to investigate this throughout the months.
Absolutely. I've found a ton of information that I unfortunately couldn't fit into this one because of time constraints, but yes, we will continue to follow this topic very closely, so stay tuned.
All right, thank you very much, Sarah, for that report.